We all know the season the Montreal Canadiens are going through. A lot of losses, not too many positives. We'll find a way to talk about a few positives on this week's show. One big positive for us, Jessica Rusnak is back after the longest and probably the greatest Christmas break anyone could ever experience. We'll talk about the Montreal Canadiens with Jess, of course, on this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. I'm Julian McKenzie, alongside the usual suspects. Cowan from the Gazette, Rick Green is here, and as I mentioned, Jessica Rusnak from CBC Daybreak is back. We're a couple days out from the Canadiens losing very badly to the Minnesota Wild. You ate to see it. 8-2, you get there. Really bad joke. I get it. I understand. You don't actually have to laugh at it. But we did say we wanted to talk about some positives. And, through a season like this, there has to be someone who was somewhat good, right? We're at the halfway point of the year for the Montreal Canadiens. Is there an MVP in this lot? I mean, there is an all-star with Nick Suzuki. Rick, I know you're very critical of the team, as we all have been on this show. I would like to know your pick for Montreal Canadiens MVP through the first half of this season.
Well, I mean, let's face it. This first half has been just a horror story in so many ways. If you want to go back to injuries, COVID, you got so many different line combinations. It's just obviously been really, really tough. And the players underachieved. But listen, you've got to give a guy that's weathered the storm pretty well, and Nick Suzuki as being the MVP. Top scorer. Yes, he's been inconsistent, at times, but overall, here's a young guy that is still, learning, if you will, how to play at the NHL level. He's got great potential, and I think he's going to progress in a really positive way. And I have to put him in there as your top guy, even in a really difficult season to date. And I'm just hopeful that he's going to be allowed to really show his stuff by surrounding him with some really good players that are going to actually help his development and actually help his overall production, because it will happen. We just got to hope that we're going to get the right setting for him to allow him to take off as a real good NHL player.
I was trying to think of a backup player in case someone said Nick Suzuki before me, but there really isn't many people you can think about on the Canadiens this year that has had a good season. The thing I liked about Nick Suzuki is he's really kind of grown into that leadership role with so many key players out this year. He's taking it upon himself to really be a leader in this room for a guy who's only 22 years old and doesn't have that much NHL experience. But another MVP, I would say, is the fans. Having to put up with this season and sit through so many games, and you can lose games and at least you say, okay, that was a competitive one. This season, there's been very few of those games that fans have sat through and thought like, wow, okay, it was a loss, but I was entertained during that time. I think a lot of times if you survive the entire game, that's something to be proud of.
Can I say the Zamboni driver at the Bell Center?
Sure.
Hey, look, the Canadiens haven't had to use him in net yet, so I don't know if we can actually call on a Zamboni driver.
But he might end up playing goalie for them before the season's over, the way this thing's going. To me, before Jake Allen got hurt, he was either the MVP or deserved the Purple Heart, one of the two, just for the pounding he was taking every night. And now we've seen the younger goalies facing that. But yeah, I think it has to be Suzuki. But to show you how badly the Canadiens are struggling, at the midway point of the season, he has 8 goals and 16 assists for 24 points. That ranks him 139th among scoring in the NHL. 139th. But he's averaging 19.58 of ice time. That ranks him 24th among NHL forwards. So he's playing a lot for a young guy. So as bad as this season has been, moving forward, I think this experience will help Suzuki. If it doesn't kill you, it only makes you stronger. That applies to this season. The amount of ice time he's getting, playing in all different situations. He's getting a little better on his faceoffs. He's handled it well. He's a character kid. I mean, I can see him being a future captain of this team. He has all the qualities I think you need for that. But again, it just shows you that offense is so bad. For so long, the offense has been bad in this team. I've mentioned before in the show, the last Canadiens player to finish in the top 10 in NHL scoring was Matt Snaslund in 1986 when Rick Green was still playing. So it's, it has to be Suzuki at this point, but yeah, there's a Zamboni driver might be second.
Oh my God. If you had $1 for every time Stu Cowan referenced that Matt Naslund stat, I think you could you could put that towards the Canadiens for cap relief. Also,
it's amazing though. It's like it'd be like the New York Yankees not having anybody in the top 10 in home runs or RBIs since 1986. It shouldn't happen with this franchise.
Also, another reason why Nick Suzuki is deserving of any Canadiens MVP. He's played 41 games for the Montreal Canadiens so far this year, and as far as I could, and he's the only guy who has not been on COVID protocol. Knock on wood for the Montreal Canadiens. I don't know how, but yeah. And of course, watch us jinx him now, and he ends up on COVID. I don't wish COVID on anyone, but like, geez, like, the fact that he escaped that is incredible.
They should maybe do a DNA test on him, and they might find a vaccine that works better. Whatever he has in his body, it's incredible. At this point, he hasn't got anything.
It's ridiculous. Okay, let's go to question 2, where we have to go from MVP to biggest disappointment. And I know the list could be long with that, but Jess, I'd like to start with you. Who do you think is the biggest disappointment for the Montreal Canadiens through the first half of this season?
I think it's pretty obvious you have to go with Jeff Petry, that you don't really know what happened to this guy. When you saw him, the way he was playing the playoffs last year, he was one of the most dependable players on the Canadiens roster in that playoff series and in the past seasons as well. And then this year, it's like, I don't know, does he have an evil twin that's taken over him? Because there's no real explanation for it.
He has red eyes.
Yeah, the red eyes. But, is it an injury? If it is an injury at this point in the season, then he should be sitting out because it's a waste of the season. So I don't necessarily think that's it. I think he is fed up with this team, and that is what's causing him to be off his game. But at the same time, they need a player like Jeff Petry to not get the emotions. Don't let the emotions get the best of him. They're looking at him to be someone that they count on to help them throughout this difficult time. And I don't think he's been able to do that. So he's been the one that has really been a surprise watching all season long.
Yeah, Petry's play has been disappointing, but I think he's spoken out more than once about Dominic Ducharme's system and how they're running around in their own end and nobody knows where they're going. And we saw that again in that Minnesota game. I mean, that was a joke, the 8-2 loss. He's frustrated. He's playing like a guy I think who wants to be traded. And I think a lot of the guys in that room are frustrated. I think the biggest disappointment for me is just the lack of compete and the lack of pride this team has shown in so many games. And we saw it again in Minnesota. I mean, that line change for Jordy Ben. Jordy Ben scored a goal against the Canadiens. Jordy Ben,
his first of the year.
That's 3 goals in the last 3 years. That goal was a result of 3 forwards just going for a line change as Minnesota was coming into the offensive zone with the puck. You learn that in Atom hockey, that you don't change in that situation. All 3 guys are just like, let's go to the bench. And Jordy Ben comes in and scores, and that's inexcusable. And that, to me, goes on Dominic Ducharme. Like, how we've talked in previous episodes of this show about guys coasting to the bench on line changes and stuff like that. And if you don't nip that in the bud, it festers, and it's festered with this team, and just a lack of compete. And especially with, the third period, Michael McNiven making his first appearance in the NHL as a goalie, and to leave him to hang out to dry like that is disgraceful. I mean, they should have, how you let a kid get up bombarded like that and play like you don't really care is, to me, shocking, but not that shocking because we've seen it many other times this season with this team.
Yeah, and I think we're all, disappointed in Petry's play, but let me speak about their whole team as a group. And, Stu, you touched on a little bit. I have watched them and I have seen what's gone on, each and every game, and really have a hard time with their work ethic. I really have a hard time with their intensity. We touched on their willingness to compete. Unacceptable. We talk about their defensive zone play as a group. Sloppy, seems to be, disorganized and unable to make it happen in the defensive zone. And that's the result of 45 to 50 shots against per game. And, you go down the list, special teams, you go down to look at goals forward against. And, when you do all these additions, it's nothing to be proud of. And the result is look, that's why they're last in the NHL, because they have been terrible in so many areas that isn't going to do it at the NHL level. So a lot of work ahead of that group and organization from the top. So it'll be interesting to see how they go about it. But I'm quite sure they're seeing a lot of areas that are damaged, and there's a lot of conversation going on how we can, try and correct some of these real bad problem areas.
There was that one shift against Minnesota where Kirill Kaprizov circled around the zone, I think about 3 times with the puck. And
twice, actually. Twice, and he got a pass off. And if that turned into a goal, that might have been one of the plays of the year.
Yeah, nobody touched him. He just circled around. It was like a man playing against boys. Like there was nobody knew what to do. It looked like nobody in the defensive zone knew what to do.
I have to look at that as, wow, the Canadiens got into a real good defensive system, because they basically stood there and protected the middle of the ice and watched him put on a skating show. So, if they were to do that, I think in other situations where they basically protect the middle and work from there, they maybe have a little more success. But anyways, that was an impressive show. And boy, oh boy, the Montreal Canadiens would really love to have a guy like that to entertain us and everybody else that watches them.
Now, reminded me of the Harlem Globetrotters against the Washington Generals, and the Canadiens were the Generals.
The Generals were due. Simpsons joke. Jess, did you want to?
The Generals did win one game, I think. The Generals beat the Globetrotters once, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Really?
Yeah, what? Yeah. I think there was one game they won.
Okay, we got to fact check that. Jess, do you want to hop in here before I give my thought?
Just one more thing is also Cole Caulfield. Where has he been this season as well? He was someone that the start of the season, many were thinking that he could be a potential finalist for the Calder, and it really has been a disappointing year. Only 1 goal from him. So there's just a lot of players that you've expected more from, and there's not really an answer as to why they haven't progressed and have taken such a big step back in their game.
Well, at the midway point of the season, Michael Pezzetta had 4 goals. That's twice as many as Caulfield and Yoel Armia combined. Who would have predicted that? I mean, Cole Caulfield with 1 goal is just like, wow.
So I'm kind of siding with Stu Cowan on disappointments for the year. I'm kind of leaning towards Dominic Ducharme, because this was his chance to show that he could really coach this team through a full 82-game season. And we've only watched 41, and he's shown that whatever system is in place is not working. I know Jeff Gorton has straight up said, he's going to stay on as head coach for the year, but considering how these games have gone, I understand they're trying to tank for a better draft position later this summer, but this cannot be good for the development of those young players. I wonder if the Canadiens would consider going back on that and thinking, Dominic Ducharme just isn't the guy, and they have to pull him off the bench.
Well, in Ducharme's defense, I mean, everything that could go wrong has gone wrong this season.
Absolutely.
Right? Start without Weber, without Price, with all the injuries, with all the COVID. But it comes down to the compete level. And if guys aren't going to play for the coach, I mean, you can lose. The compete level was much better when they had 3/4 of the Laval Rocket team playing, which leads me to believe the veterans don't want to play for this coach. And the young guys will play for any coach when they're getting a first chance to be in the NHL. So I wonder also if as Kent Hughes is watching this, there's half a season left. If the players aren't playing for the coach and they're not competing, I don't see how you can leave them there. The easy fix to me is to make Luke Richardson the interim head coach until the end of the season, but that opens up another language, can of worms, and going back to the Randy Cunneyworth days, I'm not sure if Jeff Molson wants to go there. But to me, if I was Kent Hughes watching these first few games as GM of the Canadiens, that would be my biggest concern. It's just that the compete level isn't there.
And it is the responsibility of the coach or coaches to hold these guys accountable to performing each and every night. And they go into Colorado and they give you a little bit of excitement as far as their willingness to get involved, and then poof, next thing you know, they pull the plug and say, I don't feel like playing tonight. So it's tough. I've said it before, when the players don't want to play, coaches have their hands tied to do whatever they're able to do to get these guys to play. But the bottom line is right now that there's not enough guys that are willing to play and play hard each and every night. And as we are seeing, it's the results are there because nobody's showing up each and every night.
And I think
I'll let you go ahead.
it's just one of those situations where everyone knows what's going to happen. Dominic Ducharme is not coming back next year. So the veteran players who maybe don't like his system, don't like his coaching style, already knows this. And it's kind of like everyone is coasting at the moment. So I don't know why the Canadiens have to put up this charade that, oh no, the coach is staying here or whatever. You know, pull the plug now, find someone else to take over and just see what you can do with this team in the meantime.
Yeah, when Jeff Gorton at his first news conference said that Ducharme's job is safe until the end of the season, I wonder how many guys in the locker room went, oh.
Yeah, but Stu, he's not going to say at a press conference, actually, we'll see how he does, you know?
Yeah, but he could have just said, we're gonna, you know, I'm just here.
I mean, he could have said that. He might not have said, you know, yeah, he's a lame duck for the rest of the year, but he could have. I think he could have said, you know what, like, we'll just see how this goes. Yeah, I think he could have said that.
Yeah, for sure. You could have just said, no, I'm just new here. I'm evaluating things. I still need to. And I think with Kent Hughes, I think the first thing, you know, he's going to obviously sit down and talk with all these players. And I think one of the first questions he's going to ask, especially to the veterans, is, what do you think about the coach? I think that's one of the first questions he asks.
That reminds me, actually, because we have not heard Jess's perspective on Kent Hughes. What do you think of the hiring, by the way?
Well, as a West Islander, I think this is the greatest hire that the Montreal but no, I think it's a great move. It's thinking outside the box, getting someone who's been in the hockey world for many years, but from the other side of the table to come in. And I think it's going to work well with Jeff Gorton, who's been a GM before, and see what they can do. So I was really happy that they decided to choose someone that not everyone expected was going to be the next GM.
Stu, you mentioned Michael Pezzetta. You like to mention Michael Pezzetta a lot. You seem to like his game. You seem to like the fact that he's been able to, you know, produce in a fourth line role, and I'm sure you're a big fan of his glowing locks as well. You had to make a hair joke there. Do you think he's shown enough to earn a spot on the big club for next season with the way he's been playing this year?
Well, we were talking earlier about a lack of compete level. Michael Pezzetta has had a compete level. I mean, the end of that Minnesota game when the Wild were running out the clock and passing it around and letting the game expire, he got upset and threw a body check. I don't think that was the right thing to do in that situation. It triggered a couple of melees, but it just shows that, you know, he was upset. He was pissed off, for lack of a better expression, and not too many guys on the team were. Does he have a spot on this team moving forward? I'm not certain, but I think he's done enough to probably earn a spot on a fourth line somewhere in the NHL, if it's not with the Canadiens. He reminds me, remember Nicolas Deslauriers?
Yeah.
With the Habs? He's still out there. He plays for the Anaheim Ducks. Fourth line.
Doing all right there.
Averages almost 12 minutes of ice time a game. Similar type of player to Pezzetta. Physical presence, big body, willing to throw his weight around. So, you know, the days of the so-called enforcer are gone in the NHL. You know, the days of you know, the guy who can't skate and just goes out there to fight are gone. But there's still room for energy guys like Deslauriers, like Pezzetta, who will throw their weight around, will fight if they have to, but fighting such a small part of the game now, that's not, you know, really that much a part of it. But just a guy who can get under the other players' skins and play a tough fourth line role, make it not fun for the defensemen who are on the ice when he's on the ice, have guys looking around behind them because they know he's going to finish his checks. So, yeah, I think he's done enough. If it's not with the Canadiens, I think he's done enough to earn a job somewhere in the NHL. And I'm so happy to see it. I mean, the 6th-round draft pick, nothing's been handed to this guy. He's had to work his butt off. He probably never expected to even play he'd reach a point in his career, maybe he almost given up on playing in the NHL. The way things worked this year, he got an opportunity, and he's made the most of it. So I'm really happy to see that happen. He's got character. As you say, the flowing locks. He's fun to watch. And, yeah, I think there's a spot for him in the NHL as a fourth liner, whether it's with Montreal or somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think Michael Pezzetta really cares. I mean, he shows up each night. He shows up each shift. He does everything he can to try and stay in the NHL. So you got to give the guy, he's not afraid. He challenges some big guys, you know, on the opposition team, and he shows up, and I think he's well liked by his teammates. He averages 8 minutes a game. He's a fourth line player that will bring energy and, you know, will really try and make a statement that, listen, we're here, or at least I'm going to represent the Canadiens in a good way by showing up each and every night and doing the very best that I can to allow him to play in the NHL. So I give him, you know, full marks for a guy that doesn't have tons of ability, scored 4 goals, goes to the net, goes to the areas that are, you know, the dirty areas, if you will. And he consistently gives you what he's got. And I'm just curious in his pregame ceremony, watching him prepare for his game. I'm not sure what exactly goes on there, but if that's what it takes, he should pass some of that stuff along to some of his other teammates.
Yeah, he's the perfect example of taking advantage of the opportunity that's given to him. You know, he's not the most skilled player out there. He's not a first-round pick, but he comes out and he's playing extremely well on a team that's not doing well at all. You know, he's been able to stand out, show what he can do. And, you know, not many players would do that or be able to do that. And I think that's great for him. I don't necessarily know if he will be a full-time NHLer. I can see him being one of those players that play a chunk of games in the NHL and then get sent down afterwards. But he's been, you know, a joy to watch so far. The only one that's really seems to care, bringing energy. And I hope that the Canadiens will give him sort of the benefit of the doubt when next season begins to say, like, let's continue to see what you got and have a little bit more patience with him than maybe some of the other players.
And watching him in practice, he's got a good shot. He can shoot the puck. And as Rick mentioned, midway point of the season, he's got 4 goals, 3 more than Cole Caulfield. Big reason for that is he goes to the dirty areas. I mean, he's got 1 goal with his face. You know, that's
yes,
and
true.
And he fought Ryan Reeves and lived to tell about it. And that I don't know if that's courage or crazy or what, but it just shows you he's willing to do anything to stay in the NHL. He doesn't take for granted that he's in the NHL, and I think some of his teammates have done that this season. And
that's a good point.
He's you know, he's going to do anything he can to stay in the NHL. And just mention, I mean, if he's your 13th, if he's not your 4th liner, if he's your 13th forward, he's a guy who's not going to bitch and whine and complain if he's made a healthy scratch for a couple of games. He's going to be just happy that he's part of the NHL team. As Rick said, I think his teammates love him. I loved the game in Vegas when he showed up with the cowboy hat on before the game and strutting, like coming in with some confidence. And that's a huge thing for any hockey player. So, I mean, I really like this guy, and I think he deserves a spot in the NHL. Be great if it's with the Canadiens, but if it's not with the Canadiens, I think there's other teams that have seen enough of him that would have a spot for him, just like with Nicolas Deslauriers in Anaheim.
By the way, Pezzetta, 4 goals, twice as many goals as Nicolas Deslauriers has, and I believe he has 2 in 43 games in Anaheim. Once upon a time, a member of your Montreal Canadiens. Let's talk about another young player and his future with the big club, and that of Cayden Primeau, who has been pressed into service because of all of the injuries and whatnot with the goaltending situation. We mentioned Michael McNeven earlier. I believe that's what, like the 5th or 6th goalie that the Canadiens have used, because they've used, well, Carey Price isn't available. Well, 5th or 6th on the depth chart, essentially, because Carey Price has not played, obviously. Jake Allen got him is hurt. Sam Montembeault is hurt. Then Cayden Primeau, then, well, Michael McNeven. I'm missing somebody? No, I think I got it right. Like 5. Yeah. I think I got it. Math is not my strong suit. Anyway, what are your takeaways from his play this season? And is he still in line to be the goaltender of the future for this franchise?
I think he's over his head a little bit right now. I mean, he's played 6 games at the NHL level, 4.3 goals against. You know, with the team that he has in front of him, there's no better way for a goalie to lose his confidence when you have that type of group defending, and him having to face so many tough shots. And, you know, it's tough on a young guy. So 65 games in the American League. I think that the best scenario for him is to go back to the American League. Obviously, he can't do it. Easier said than done with all the injuries, but he's got to play. He's got to develop at the American League level. We can't destroy the confidence level this kid has to allow him to, you know, to mature and be able to handle the NHL pressure, hopefully in the future. But, you know, right now he's in a really tough situation where he's thrown to the wolves, so to speak, and he's got to fend for himself, and he's got to make unbelievably big things happen with a team that's really struggling. So he's got his hands full, but I would really like to see him go down in the American League, develop, and then see how he progresses, and then give him a chance to come up and play at the NHL level when he has a better supporting cast.
Yeah, at the start of the season, when they said that Carey Price would not be ready for the beginning of the year, I thought, okay, this is a great opportunity for Cayden Primeau to see what he can get. I assumed that he would back up Jake Allen and they would divide the goaltending duties. But then we quickly started to see that, this team is not playing very well and they're not helping out their goalies at all. And for a young goalie like Cayden Primeau, it's so hard to evaluate him because he's not getting really a fair shot here. And, as Rick said, like, confidence for a goaltender is huge. And being part of a team that's not helping you out, especially that game against Minnesota, there was no one there for him. So is it worth having him up here? And so for many years, they've said, once Carey Price moves on with his career, Cayden Primeau is kind of the guy everyone's looking at. But right now, you can't really tell if he is ready to take on that role. But it is also a very difficult year, and no one looks like they're really ready to take on a new role or playing up to their full potential. So it's a really hard year to evaluate what he can do.
Yeah, Primeau's been pulled in 3 of his 6 starts this season, which obviously isn't good. My concern is he looks like a deer in the headlights in the NHL. Not just this season, going back to last season when he was called up, he just looked like, whoa, like, and you got to remember he's a 7th round draft pick.
Yeah,
so there were obviously holes in his game that the scouts saw, and I know, speaking with a scout, not specifically about Primeau, but he's telling me that when a guy's a 7th round pick, whether he's a goalie or a forward or whatever, they might have spurts where they look a lot better, but most of the times at the end of the day, they're going to be that 7th round pick. Some of the exceptions are like a smaller guy, like a smaller forward, like a Brendan Gallagher who wasn't drafted just because of his size. Cayden Primeau's a big kid. That's one of the reasons the Canadiens took him in the 7th round. I think they saw a big kid. 7th round, you're grasping for something. And the guy who was a late bloomer, he was named the best goalie in NCAA hockey. But NCAA hockey is a lot different than the NHL. We've seen that with Cole Caulfield. We're seeing that with Cayden Primeau also. Having said that, I'm wondering if Sam Montembeault has passed him on the goalie depth chart right now. Sam Montembeault was a 3rd round draft pick. He was the 6th goalie selected at that year's draft, which means in that age group, he was considered the 6th best goalie in the world. He had been part of the Hockey Canada program. He hasn't really had a chance in the NHL up to now. And that's one of the reasons I think the Canadiens picked him up on waivers, is they might see more potential in him than they see in Cayden Primeau. And at this point, the way Montembeault played those back-to-back games when he faced 50 shots and looked quite good, kudos, maybe Eric Raymond, the goalie coach, has tinkered with him and got him playing better. But yeah, with Cayden Primeau, like, I'm not convinced now that he is the Canadiens goalie of the future. He's still young, but I really wonder if Sam Montembeault might be moving ahead of him as far as I don't think Sam Montembeault's going to be a number 1 goalie in the NHL, but as far as for a backup role with the Canadiens, I'm wondering if he might have still half a season to go, but going into the second half of the season, I wonder if he might be a step ahead of Cayden Primeau.
That's a really interesting point. Rick, I don't know if you're going to add to that.
Yeah, no, I just going to say that, I'm not sure in pulling goalies, late in the game is the best scenario. You can talk about maybe changing the momentum, but for me, the bottom line is you let these young guys get in there, let them, face what they're facing. Maybe it isn't pretty. A lot of times it isn't, but it tests their character and mental toughness on how they will respond and how they will fight and find ways to finish the game that they started versus just basically giving them a note by getting them out of there. And I'm not sure how that works with the mindset of goalies. Obviously, they're a special breed, but I'm not a big fan of that.
Yeah, and when he pulled Primeau after the second period of Minnesota, I can see why Ducharme did it, and he said after the game he wanted to protect him, but it really wasn't fair to Michael McNiven to have a guy play his first NHL game getting thrown in the 3rd period without a warm-up, without the preparation, the pregame preparation you would make knowing you're starting. He was maybe trying to give the team a spark to play better in front of the goalie. That didn't happen. They played worse when McNiven went in the net. But I just, in that scenario, if Jake Allen's a backup, okay, you pull Primeau and you put him in. But I really didn't think it was fair to Michael McNiven to put him in for his first game in the NHL in that scenario. I would have told Primeau to suck it up. It's a character test for him. Put him back in for the 3rd period and see what he can do.
Yep. I did not think we'd have to think about the goaltending depth chart until maybe later in the offseason. But that was a really interesting point about Samuel Montembeault. But that's going to do it for this week's edition of Hockey Inside Out. Jess, it's like you never left, essentially. Just perfect from you. And, of course, always great efforts from Rick and Stu as well. Subscribe to the YouTube page. Let us know in the comments section just how we did. I guess it would just be nice if you just left a nice comment on our YouTube videos. It's something that, brightens our day. That'd be nice. Also subscribe to the Hockey Inside Out newsletter, MontrealGazette.com/newsletters, and of course, HockeyInsideOut.com for full episodes and other articles from guys like Eric Leon, Brendan Kelly as well, and of course, stuff from Stu. Bye, guys.